Good day, everyone. My name is Jedi P. Castro from DCPET 31, and today I'll be sharing my reflections on an influential case in Philippine law, the Chavez V. Gonzales, GR or General Register number 168338, which was decided on February 15, 2008. This case deals with fundamental rights such as freedom of speech and freedom of the press, as well as the limits of RA 4200 or the anti-wiretapping law. First, we'll go over the case background, the key facts, the issues, the Supreme Court's ruling, answering 5 questions in each segment, and finally, the lessons that we can draw from this case. So, let's head right into it. To start with, what is the Chavez v. Gonzales case all about? Well, this case revolves around a legal dispute between former Solicitor General Francisco Chavez and several government officials, including Secretary of Justice Raul Gonzales. Now, the core of the issue involved the government's actions to restrict media from broadcasting or publishing a set of controversial recordings known as the Hello Garci tapes. Well, these tapes are allegedly captured conversations between then President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo and an election official, which seemed to imply discussions of manipulating election results. Now, the government argued that because these recordings were allegedly obtained through illegal wiretapping, airing or publishing them would violate RA 4200 or the anti-wiretapping law. They warned media outlets that doing so could result in criminal charges. However, Francisco Chavez challenged this, arguing that the warnings were unconstitutional and violated the media's rights to freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. So, at its heart, this case was about balancing the public's right to know with the state's interest in enforcing the anti-wiretapping law, which is a clash between press freedom and privacy laws. Now, what are the facts of the case? The case began after the 2004 election when Press Secretary Ignacio Bunye announced on June 5 that the opposition was planning to destabilize the government by releasing a tape conversation between Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, the president, and a high-ranking official from the Commission on Elections or the COMELEC, who is Commissioner Virgilio Garciliano. The conversation was said to have been captured through wiretapping. In a press briefing, Bunye presented two versions of the tape. One claimed to be the full unedited version, and the other a spliced or doctored version, which suggested that President Arroyo instructed Garciliano to manipulate the election results in her favor. Although Bunye initially confirmed that the voice on the tape was that of the president, he later retracted his statement. Now on June 7, 2005, Attorney Alan Padilla, a former counsel for deposed President Joseph Estrada, released his own version of the wiretap conversation. This version contained purported conversations not only between President Arroyo and Garciliano, but also with the first gentleman, Jose Miguel Arroyo, and the late Senator Robert Barbers. The release of the tape led to an immediate response from the Department of Justice or the DOJ. DOJ Secretary Raul Gonzales warned that those in possession of the tape or who broadcasted its content could face charges under the Wiretapping Law Act or the RA 4200. He specifically targeted media personalities like Bunye and Padilla. On June 9, Gonzales instructed the National Bureau of Investigation or the NBI to investigate media outlets that aired or printed the contents of the tape, with a focus of Inc7.net, a joint venture between the Philippine Daily Inquirer and GMA7 television network, for its wider online reach. Additionally, the National Telecommunication Commission or the NTC issued a warning to radio and television stations to avoid airing the tape without proper verification, warning of potential penalties including license revocation for violating the anti-wiretapping law and broadcasting false information. Now, what are the issues of the case? The central issue in this case is whether Republic Act 4200, the anti-wiretapping law, can be used to prevent the media from airing the Hello Garci tapes, and whether this restriction infringes upon constitutional rights such as freedom of speech and press. Petitioner Chavez argues that the government's action, including the National Telecommunications Commission's or the NTC's attempt to regulate the broadcast of the tapes, constitute unconstitutional prior restraint, a form of censorship that suppresses information before it reaches the public. Chavez asserts that the public has a right to know about potential misconduct or election fraud by public officials, and that limiting access to the tapes violates the fundamental rights to free expression. In contrast, the government contends that airing the tapes would promote the illegal use of wiretaps and set a harmful precedent for the media, violating privacy rights. The NTC's actions are defended as part of its mandate to regulate telecommunication, with the argument that broadcast media have fewer constitutional protections than print media. The Supreme Court was asked to address two major questions: whether the NCT's action violate the constitutional guarantees of free speech and press, and the extent of the public's right to access information on matters of public concern. The case also provided an opportunity for the court to clarify the legal standards for imposing restriction on media, particularly in the context of broadcast versus print media, and to define the scope of prior restraint in regulating speech. So the Supreme Court was tasked with resolving two key issues: the interpretation and limit of RA 4200 in relation to media rights, and whether the restriction on airing the tapes violated constitutional freedoms of expression and press. Now, what was the ruling of the Supreme Court in this case? Well, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Francisco Chavez, declaring that the government's warning to the media as unconstitutional. The court found that RA 4260, the anti-wiretapping law, does not provide a basis to restrict the media from publishing or broadcasting the tapes. Once information reaches the public domain, it cannot be restricted on the grounds of privacy or legality of its origin anymore, especially if it serves public interest. The court clarified that the anti-wiretapping law criminalizes unauthorized wiretapping but does not prohibit the publication or airing of information if it has already been exposed to the public. This decision emphasized that the government cannot use the anti-wiretapping law to silence the media, as this would constitute an unlawful form of prior restraint. This ruling reaffirmed that freedom of speech and freedom of the press are essential rights, especially when dealing with information that impact the public welfare. The court stressed that any limitations on this freedom must meet the highest standards of justification. Now, lastly, what are some of my takeaways and learnings from this case and the application of the anti-wiretapping law on this case? Reflecting on the Chavez V. Gonzales case, there are several key insights on the balance between protecting individual rights and safeguarding press freedom in a democratic society. This case underlines how fundamental the freedom of speech and press are to maintaining an accountable government. The ruling reminds us that while privacy laws like the anti-wiretapping law aim to protect individuals' conversation from unauthorized interception, they must not be misused to prevent public access to critical information, particularly in cases where the information reveals potential misconduct by public officials, such as the Hello Garci, which is about a possible election fraud. A significant takeaway is that the Supreme Court's position on prior restraint. The court's decision makes it clear that censoring information before it reaches the public is almost always unconstitutional, unless there's a compelling and exceptional reason to justify it. This reinforces the idea that government limitation on press freedom must be extremely well founded to prevent misuse that could stifle free expressions or hinder public discourse. Furthermore, this case also highlights the important role of the court in balancing different interests, like the right to privacy versus the public's right to know. Here, the court maintained a careful balance, emphasizing that openness and accountability are essential in a democratic society. The media is key in upholding these values, and the ruling protects the media's role in keeping the government in check. So, in the end, the Chavez V. Gonzales case shows how vital our constitutional freedom are and reminds us to always stay alert to protect them. It's a lesson in ensuring that individual rights are respected without taking away from the public rights to the information, especially when it concerns the honesty of our government. So, this case encourages us to value and defend these rights as they are crucial for a fair and open society. Now, my name is Jede Picasso from DCPT 31. Thank you for watching my video on the Chavez v. Gonzales case and the application of RA 4200 or the anti-wiretapping law on the case.